I just want to warn you in advance, I'm going to get very overexcited and I apologise. Hello, I'm Dan Smith and this is my Hugendubel bucket list. I'm very excited to be here today to talk about a bunch of books that I think are brilliant, and it's very easy to be quite evangelical when there's a book that you love. This first book is The Overstory by Richard Powers. This was recommended by some friends to me. It's essentially about people's relationships with trees, which I think to a lot of people would be like not for me, not for me, which I completely understand. But it's one of the most beautifully written, readable, engaging, fun, brilliant books. It's like a collection of short stories. It takes 10 different characters, kind of through the lens of the American immigrant experience, and it traces sort of through the history of their lives and how they wound up in America, right through to sort of the present day. It's kind of like almost like a heist. It's just very exciting. It's very excitingly written, and it pulls these characters together through a story of activism. I grew up in London and I've always lived in the city, and I think it's a really lovely way to think about the trees that are around us that we don't really think about, and how much longer than us they've been around, and how casually we kind of cut them down and discard them as a society. So this is one of those books that after I read it, I found myself just giving people copies. And if I was at a party and chatting to someone who hadn't read it, I'd like drunkenly order it for them. That's how much I love it. I have quite a busy brain, and so I need the quiet. I can't read if there's music on or people talking. So I guess for me, it's a solitary space. If the sun is out, it's so great to go sit in a park or sit outside somewhere. Particularly a book like this, if you can hear the sort of the breeze in the leaves of the trees. Yeah, The Overstory, Richard Powers, is fantastic. Next book is The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's a kind of gothic tale of this very good-looking young guy who has a portrait done of himself. He stays young and beautiful forever, but this painting of him sort of manifests visually all of the kind of the aging whilst he stays young. So it's about London society, inequality, human nature, the sides of ourselves that we hide in society, and and from the people that we know. And it's a really good read. I mean, it's a classic for a reason. There's a song on the album called Red Wine and Wild, which is about Oscar Wilde's complicated, some would say toxic relationship with Bosie, who was his kind of on-off partner for a lot of his later life. And I'm sorry to sound like an advert, but I would direct you towards our episode of Muses and Ampersand podcast, where we talk about Oscar Wilde and his fascinating life. And I was super interested to find out more and more about Oscar Wilde. So the next book is this absolutely extraordinary book. It's called Radioactive, Marie and Pierre Curie, A Tale of Love and Fallout. I want you to see the pages. It's a sort of story of their lives, sort of a graphic novel, almost like a textbook as well, but it's got photos and drawings and paintings and maps and sort of old documents all put in. It does an amazing job at sort of reflecting them as people and the challenges of their time, and the incredible achievement and the hard work that went into everything they did, and how they sort of, particularly Marie was kind of constantly pushing against society that was rejecting her and wasn't really accepting her. There's a song on Ampersand called Marie and Polonium, and the idea with the Ampersand album was to do songs about people that I either knew a bit about or didn't know about at all, but people from history and people from culture and people from the world of like science and art who did these amazing things, but looking at them through a lens that hopefully humanizes and modernizes them. I was looking for things in all of these people's experiences that were relatable to me and that I thought could really emotionally resonate. This book does a fantastic job on it, but yeah, in the song, I guess we wanted to kind of pay tribute to her, the complexities of life and the complex relationships we have with things. You might discover something amazing or get the thing you wanted in life, but it's not necessarily the best thing for you. And anyway, this book is brilliant. I did English literature at university, and I felt very lucky for being able to do that and spend a bunch of my time immersed in novels and in literature and poems and the lives of all these incredible authors. For me, what's amazing with great literature, it sort of takes you out of your own mind and transports you to another time or place. It gives you empathy, it opens your mind up to what life is like for everyone else. And we all have similar problems, but we also have we all have an individual experience of life as well. So yeah, for me, that's what I've always loved about reading. And I think the degree that I was lucky enough to do just gives context to that. You understand why people write in certain styles, why some people's writing is really accessible and exciting, and why some people are trying to challenge you, and where that comes from, and why they were doing it, and how that relates to their life, and what life was like when they existed. So yeah, it's this album for me, and the podcast that we're doing with it, like, I feel like having done the English degree allowed me to sort of think in a way that's been useful to this. So this is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This was recommended by a friend. It's sort of a fantasy book, but not really. I mean, I don't read a huge amount of fantasy. So my friend basically told me to read this, and they said to me, like, I know you're going to find it irritating, but that's the point. Like, stick with it, stick with it, stick with it. And I read it on a holiday a few years ago, and it is genuinely brilliant. Like, I sort of want to talk about it loads, but I actually don't want to talk about it that much, because I think I didn't know anything about it going in. I wouldn't read anything about it going in. I would just say, like, trust me, read this. I picked this also because it kind of relates to one of our songs called Intros and Narrators, which is the opening song off the Ampersand album. I wanted to write a song at the end of the whole process that kind of sort of examined, like, my role in the album. I knew that people were going to ask me why I wanted to write about other people and write as other people, which is, I think, completely justified and a fair question. So I kind of wanted to address that head on in Intros and Narrators. But yeah, it made me think of this, a recent read with a potentially unreliable narrator that I cannot recommend enough. It's fantastic. I am so much better at buying books than I am at reading them. I always get excited and buy a lot, and actually often fail to have the time to read them. But I've always got 3 or 4 books on the go. As someone that travels a bunch and sleeps badly, I've got really into audiobooks as well. I never used to listen to them, but I think as an insomniac, I used to listen to a lot of podcasts, and and then sort of took the step from there into audiobooks. And it's become an amazing way to sort of have a few things on the go, but also to find other spaces in your lives to sort of take in those stories. But yeah, I think if more people read, and obviously a lot of people do, but I think if more people were up for reading and up for deep diving into other people's minds and experiences, it could only be a positive thing. If you really love, a bit like with albums as well, if you love it and you're me, you kind of you're like a cheerleader for that book, and you want to buy it for everyone that you know. It's kind of your experience with this book. I think about that a lot in terms of, whilst we're all reading the same thing, you bring to it your life experience, and so you've got, how I picture this book in my head could be so different from how you picture it in your head. And there's something quite nice about that sort of unifying experience, but that also is quite individualized as well. Anyway, okay, my next book is a conveniently turned on ebook. It's called Eslanda by Barbara Ransbury. And this is an incredible biography of Eslanda Robeson, who was a, academic, civil rights activist, manager. She was married to a man called Paul Robeson, who was a really famous actor and singer. They were like a power couple. And they both lived, amazing, impressive, sort of widescreen international lives together and apart, and they both achieved incredible things. Eslanda, what an amazing person. She's so brilliant. So yeah, this is that's why I recommended this. This is a really popular book, Tomorrow, which was recommended by friends a lot, by Gabrielle Zevin. I think that's how you say it. It's just really brilliant. It's about the lives of some friends who, I think in the 90s, basically create video games. One of the characters, when she's in college, the first game that she programs is called Emily Blaster. So I think it's like a first-person shoot 'em up as Emily Dickinson, and you're like shooting, I think it's like shooting poems or shooting words, which is very funny in the book and it's great. There's a song on the album called Emily and Her Penthouse in the Sky, which is about Emily Dickinson, and the idea that, you know, whilst people see her as this kind of reclusive poet, she was a lot more than that, and you know, there's a lot there about like why is she remembered like that, who, you know, it's not necessarily true. Anyway, back to this. It's brilliant. Gabrielle Zevin just she sort of writes humanity and the complex, nuanced experience of being alive and going through life step by step really brilliantly and compassionately. Yeah, it's fantastic. The one thing that never occurred to me was to try and write a book, because I just don't think I'm clever enough or have enough ideas. But, you know, it's also good to know in life that you can just be a really good fan and a good cheerleader. But yeah, if anyone has any recommendations for good books, preferably short and easy to read. You know, I'll take picture books and I'll take graphic novels. I'm not a snob. But yeah, and you know, I think all we ever want is to be moved and have a, you know, a brilliant story and to be transported somewhere else. And so yeah, this, you know, for me, this whole Ampersand project, it kind of is that.
Thank you very much. Wonderfully said.
Cool.